Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel, The Danmei Central. I'm your host Ananya, and this is a series called Let's Talk Danmei, where I'll be reviewing and retelling Danmei stories suggested by you guys. So let's get started. This is the first video of this series, and we will be starting with a Danmei called The Dumb Husky and His White Cat Shizun, written by Robao Uchuro. This is a very popular anime. I think a lot of you guys have already read the story or heard about the story before, but I thought that it is a good idea for us to dive in with the story first. I would also like to mention that this video is in no way or form a read-along video. I'll not be reading excerpts from the book. I'll just be retelling the story in my own words in a summarized manner. So if you want to have the full experience of the book, you can buy the book on Amazon. It is available under the name of The Husky and His White Cat Shizun, written by Robao Uchuro, published by Seven Seas Entertainment. And you can buy the book from there and support the author. I'll be mentioning the trigger warnings for this book here. So guys, if you cannot handle these topics, I would highly recommend you to stop watching this video and do not read this book. Homosexual content is actually not a trigger warning, but I mentioned it here because some people might not feel comfortable with such storylines. So guys, it's not my fault. You have been warned. For my other audiences here, we are going to start with the story right now. Enjoy! Chapter 1. This Venerable One dies. Characters introduced. 1. Moran. Courtesy name Mo Wei-yu. So the story starts with Moran, one of the two main protagonists of our story. He is portrayed as a very energetic, fun-loving, carefree, naughty kind of a person in his teens or youths. But he grows up to be a very cold and powerful tyrant and the first emperor of the cultivation world. Tai Xianjun. Number 2. Shui Meng. Shui Meng or Shui Gongzi is the cousin of Moran, Mo Wei-yu. He is the young master of the leader of Zishang Peak, son of the sect leader. He had been praised by all as a young prodigy, the darling of the heavens. Sects mentioned. Number 1. Rufang sect. This sect is just mentioned for a brief period of time. All we know about it is it was destroyed by Moran when he became the emperor. So with that said, let's dive into the first chapter. This Venerable One dies. So once upon a time, there lived a boy named Moran, courtesy name Mo Wei-yu. From a very young age, he was mistreated and teased by dog slurs everywhere he went. Even his godmother didn't hold back. His bedmates would also often refer to him using dog slurs, but as a way to encourage him or boast about him. It was said that he had the sweetest tongue and handsome face that could sway anyone's heart. But he was as lethal as an alpha dog when the opportunity came. Everyone who experienced him before were left impressed. Those who didn't longed for him, so much so that he was notoriously famous on the streets. On the other hand, these slurs were actually incredibly on point. Mo Wei-yu was seriously a dim-witted, tail-wagging dog. No one could even imagine that this dumb dog would soon become a cold, ruthless, ferocious tyrant emperor of the cultivation world, Ta Xianquan. But once he became the emperor, these rumors about him disappeared in a jiffy. Puff! Gone. Just like that. Ever since he became the emperor, Moran grew bored day by day. He began to feel lonely in his palace and started to wonder about his life and the choices that he made. Every day he used to sit on his throne and think. He remembered a time when he was once gifted a puppy by a small sect from a distant land. It was a chubby little grayish-white ball of fur with a flame-shaped mark on his forehead. Even if he was tiny, his demeanor was that of a majestic one, just like a wolf. He was energetic and naughty and so wishful that he tried to scale the throne every single day, but failed to do so. As he sat on his throne of his lonely palace, he looked at that energetic little creature and smiled, calling him a dumb mutt, and closed his eyes. Eventually, the puppy grew to become a beautiful dog, and with time, the dog met his demise. But Moran stood there, still alone on his throne. He could feel the time slipping by. He started to analyze his life, all his sins, his achievements, shame, prestige, ups and downs. It all felt like a fever dream for him, just like it all happened a second ago, and now he has nothing left to do, no one to question him at all. He didn't even realize how quickly 32 years have gone by. He was so lonely that everything seemed untasteful to him, like there was nothing left for him to do. Everything was worthless and lost its flavor and appeal. He had witnessed his closest peers fade away one by one, right before his eyes. Even his dumb dog is gone now. He began to feel that soon he must be on his way to hell too. Time for him to finally embrace his final destiny, death itself. As he was deep into his thoughts, he picked up a grape and began to peel its skin, with slow and steady motion, as if he was admiring the fruit and lazily ate it. He began to look closely at his fingers and thought about his life again, and how his time has finally come to leave it all behind. Interestingly, it was not always this peaceful and easy for him. He had to undergo extreme difficulty. He had to be ruthless, shameless, possess outstanding power, and disregard for what others think about him. Previously, when he was still a young disciple of the Shizun peak, there was no emperor or a higher authority to govern all the sects. All of the 10 great sects were involved in fights to determine who will rule the world, thus creating a chaos. On one hand, they wanted to take the lead. On the other, all the elders were worried about their fate as to how they were going to be recorded into history books. But Moran was different. He didn't care much about what others think about him. If he wants it, he gets it, even if he is shamed for it. He didn't care at all, as long as he wanted to do it. His attitude has always been like that. I want it, I get it. I want it, I do it. No matter how ridiculous the thing is, he's going to do it. For example, drinking the finest wine, marrying the most drop-dead gorgeous woman of the world, or declaring himself as Ta Xinjun, emperor. After becoming the emperor, he would slaughter anyone who dares to oppose him. Under his rule, the cultivation world underwent grief, desolation, starvation, and countless deaths. Most importantly, the Rufeng sect of the 10 great sects was annihilated completely. Even Moran's great teacher was defeated and imprisoned by him, and he was never seen again. The land, which was once filled with greenery, clear water, and calm seas, was now surrounded by a thick layer of nauseating evil miasma over it. Moran was unbothered and didn't care for superstitions. For example, the ridiculous titles of his reigning years, which was clustered in the 3 years. First 3 year, Wangba, which means tortoise. The idea behind it? He came up with it while fishing. Second 3 years, Gua, which means croc. Where did he came up with it? He came up with it when he heard frogs croaking in his garden. Just when everyone thought it couldn't get worse, Moran came up with the ultimate one for his 3rd years, Jiba, which means sea's battle. According to translation it is, but it also means dick in Chinese. Inspiration? Well, he was inspired by the rebellion that was brewing against him, caused by the spiritual cultivators, Buddhists, Taoists, and the righteous people of Jianghu. Actually, it was taken from the saying, lay down your arms and seize battle. But when you just say Jiba, it just sounds like dick. So, yeah. So, it was said that that was the ultimate one of all the names of his reigning years that he came up with. The first year was known as Jiba Yuan Nian, first year of Sea's battle, but it more or less sounded like the first year of cock and balls. Second year was called the second year of cock, and then came 3rd year of cock. People thought it was ridiculous. Might as well call the trio Age of Cock. But no one dared to question Moran. After 3 awful years, the time has finally come to end the so-called Age of Cock. People were eagerly waiting for the auspicious occasion and the event of naming the 4th year. What would Emperor Mo Weiyu come up with this time? But for Moran, he had lost all interest in these trivial matters, as he was aware that the situation of the rebellion had gone too far, and soon the band of rebels were planning to overthrow him. After a tiresome battle and losing countless heroes, the band of rebels finally gathered at the foothill of Mount Sishang, as the majestic palace of Emperor lies at the summit of it. Since all the rebels have gone this far without backing out, they were adamant to enter the palace to face Moran. But they were still hesitant as to who would take the lead up the mountain and barge in first. Even if they were prepared for the worst, there was still hesitation as to who should be facing Moran head first, as all of them were aware that once he was overthrown, there needs to be a new order, a new leader. So they were hesitant to waste all of the energy at this very last moment. Not only this, they were also afraid that Moran would suddenly appear from the sky and attack them for attacking his palace. They were afraid that they would fall for his tricks and be perished by his unfathomable spiritual powers. At this moment of confusion, a young man emerged from the crowd and started to question and argue with their decisions. This young man was Shuimeng, the adoptive cousin of Moran. He was furious with the crowd of heroes. Why? Because of the current attitude towards their situation. He was ready to scale the mountain to barge into Moran's palace to question him. He was furious and wanted to know what did Moran do with his Shizun after capturing him. Is he still alive? It's been 10 years since he was imprisoned. If he is still alive, where is he? If he is dead, his body has not been found yet. All these questions were bothering him for years, and now that he was this close to getting his closure, he didn't want anything to go wrong. 10 years ago, when Moran became the emperor, he terrorized and destroyed the Rufang sect along with 72 cities under its administration, and planned to do the same with the other 9 sects too. At this very moment, Shuimeng and Moran's Shizun was the one who stopped Moran by risking his own life. So the fact that the crowd is being ungrateful and unwilling to seek justice for his Shizun does not sit well with him. After a heated argument with the crowd, Shui Gongzi alone began to walk towards the summit. As he approached the palace, he saw 3 graves at the foot of the heaven-piercing tower. The first grave was a bit old. It said, "Grave of Steam Consort Shu." The second grave was a bit freshly sealed. It said, "Grave of Deep-Fried Empress Song." Shuimeng was speechless.
Huh?
He turned to the third grave. It was surprisingly open. No one's body lay there, just an empty coffin, and the tombstone remained unmarked. At the bottom of the grave, there lie the things that are favored by Moran: pear blossom wine, wontons, spicy numbling mala side dishes, etc. Could it be? Shuimeng thought. Did Moran dug it for himself? Is he ready to die? Shuimeng was in a frenzy. He couldn't believe it. Moran cannot just die like that. He is not like that. He is the kind of a person that clung onto things and never let anything go. How could he just end his life like that? He refused to believe it. Shuimeng turned around and walked back to the direction of Wushan Palace. Moran sat on the throne. His eyes were shut closed, and his face was as pale as a dead person. Shuimeng was right. Moran was indeed ready to embrace death. He really did dug his own grave right there. A few hours ago, he asked all his servants of his palace to dismiss themselves, and then swallowed a very potent poison. And for the past few hours, he has been sitting on his throne and experiencing the pain of his organs dissolving one by one. Just then, the door of his palace flung wide open. Moran didn't even have to look up. He had already guessed who it is. He called out, "Shuimeng, you have finally arrived." And Shuimeng stood there without uttering a single word. It was a reunion of old acquaintances. disciples who were once from the same sect, who shared the same Shizun. Moran stood there propping his chin up in one hand, eyes down, face expressionless. People often describe Moran as a monster, but in reality, he was a very handsome man with delicate features. Shuemeng immediately knew he had poisoned himself. Even if Shuemeng was hesitant to even speak to him, he clenched his fist and demanded, "Where's my Shizun? Where's our Shizun? What did you do with him?" Moran pretended not to hear Shuemeng, so Shuemeng asked him a second time, "Where is our master?" This time Moran actually opened his eyes, but was unable to focus, and after a back and forth of questioning, he finally answered, "Shizun is long gone. He is no more. He is dead." Moran had actually tortured his Shizun to death and preserved his body with his spiritual energy in a resting place. On hearing this, Shuemeng stepped back involuntarily, eyes wide open. He could not believe what he was hearing. He slumped on the floor, tears rolling down his cheeks. He could not believe Moran could actually kill his Shizun. That Shizun, who used to treat him so kindly, trained him in martial arts, taught him cultivation and the art of self-defense. How he taught him poetry, calligraphy, reading and writing. How he once learned how to cook, just so he could feed him. Even if his hands were covered in cuts and wounds, he never complained. He used to once wait for him to return home from nightfall to dawn. How could Moran be this inhumane? Even if Shuemeng wanted to say all this, all he could blurt out in his state of shock was, "Shizun had a bad temper and was a man of few words. But I know he treated you well, so how could you?" After saying so, his throat gave up, and he couldn't continue to say anything anymore. After some time, Moran began to reason as to why he had to do what he did. According to Moran, Shizun knew Moran had someone who was dear to him, and he wanted to save his life. But Shizun didn't budge at all. Even if Shizun could have saved that particular person in question, he didn't even try and just let him die right before Moran's eyes. He didn't even try to save him once and turned a blind eye, even if Moran was practically grabbing his feet and begging him to do so.
No!
After a long moment of silence, as he was suffering from this gut-wrenching pain of his organs being dissolved, Moran could eventually speak. He said that, out of courtesy of his relation of master and disciple, the body of his Shizun is resting in the Red Lotus Pavilion at the southern peak, and it's well preserved by his spiritual powers, and suggested Shuemeng to go and have a look at his master one last time before it's too late. Since Moran is soon going to die now, his spiritual powers will also be gone, and so will the body of this Shizun. As soon as Moran dies, the body of their master will turn into dust. So Moran insisted, "Shuemeng, hurry up and go, or it will be too late." After saying so, he closed his eyes. Blood ran out of the corners of his lips, indicating that the poison had reached his heart. On witnessing this view, Shuemeng's anger had already been dissipated, and he ran off to his master's grave. He hopped on his sword and flew away. Moran slowly stood up and made a seal with his hands, and in a moment he he was transported to the foot of the heaven-piercing tower. He slowly went into the third grave and lay there in the coffin. He looked up in the sky and stared at the stars. He didn't know why he wanted this to be his resting place. But he thought it might not be that bad because of the flowers that bloomed there. He was once an illegitimate son who was ridiculed and mistreated, but later became one of the most powerful individuals in the cultivation world. Lastly, he didn't even bother writing an epitaph for his own grave, and thus the grave of the first emperor of the cultivation world was left unmarked. Oh wow, that was actually a very long first chapter. Well, it was supposed to be a long one since they have to establish a lot of the characters, the plots, the mood for the story. So, yeah, that was a good start, not gonna lie. But I was not expecting to be bombarded with the intense description of Moran's sex life. That too in the first few lines of the story. So, yeah, that was a shocker for me. And what's wrong with this weird names that Moran comes up with? Fried Empress, what was the name? Fried Empress, Steamed Consort, Tortoise, Croc, and the ultimate one, Chiba. Yeah, Dick. I mean, I can't. But overall, it was a good read. I liked it. And yeah, so that's my verdict of the first story. I'm sorry, not the first story, the first chapter. So, not bad. Anyways, moving on to the second chapter. This venerable one lives. Chapter 2. This venerable one lives. Characters introduced. Rongjiu. Rongjiu is the male prostitute, and he works at the brothel where Moran used to visit during his teens and early 20s. This venerable one lives. A woman is seated at the distance and is reciting a poem. Her voice is so sweet and melodious that it seems like she is breathing life into the poem. But for Moran, all the voice did was hurt his head and irritate him. So much so that he wanted his servants to kick this woman out of his palace. Not only that, but all the Shishang Peak. But wait, why is he hearing all this? Wasn't he supposed to be dead?
Huh?
This thought shocked him, and his eyes flung wide open. Moran struggled to look around until his eyesight adjusted to the light. He saw that he was lying on a bed, but it was a bit strange for him. Why? Because it was not his bed at Shizun Peak. It was a bed with carvings of a dragon and a phoenix with a heavy fragrance to it. The bedspread was pink and purple and was covered by embroideries of meandering ducks. Only then did he realize he was at the brothel. After some deliberation, Moran remembered that during his youth he had gone through a phase of rebellion and indulgence in some questionable hobbies and habits, during which he used to visit this very establishment. But he recalls that this place was later sold and was converted into a wine shop in his 20s. So, how did he end up here? He wondered. His mind was full of weird thoughts, and he was imagining different scenarios as to what was happening. As he turned around to the other side of the bed, he unexpectedly came face to face with a different man. This was his second shock. He was at a brothel and he's sharing a bed with another man. What? Upon closer inspection, he found that the man's face had a delicate appearance with lovely features. Wait, he thought, he recognizes him from somewhere. He could not properly remember his name. Was it wrong something? Sun or Jiu? Doesn't matter, he thought. What's there in a name? All that matters is that this wrong son or Jiu, whatever, caught an STD and died years ago. So why is he sleeping next to him? Moran looked closer. Rongjiu's hands and legs were covered with markings of being tied up with ropes. He found the rope art so familiar because, of course, it was his own doing. The concept of rebirth was not an alien concept for him as a cultivator. He figured that he had somehow traveled back to time. Moran then stood in front of a rundown copper mirror and saw his reflection. He was right. His appearance is young. He was 32 when he died in his previous life. But now, he doesn't look a day older than 15. Maybe 16. Out of pure frustration and excitement, Moran cried out.
Whoa!
Upon hearing this cry, Rongjiu got up lazily from bed. He tidied up a little and yawned. He asked Moran, "What's wrong? Why is he up so early? Did he have a nightmare of some kind? What's going on?" Moran did not utter a single word. He just kept quiet for a long time. Rongjiu wondered if the silence meant that Moran was in a bad mood. So, he walked towards Moran and hugged him from the back and started acting coy. Moran felt a cold chill run down his spine. His face turned dark. He wanted to flung this delicate-looking Rongjiu across the room, but he somehow managed to suppress this desire. Moran's head was still heavy and in a state of confusion about what's happening right now. He thought he has to be careful. After all, if the first thing he does is to beat the living hell out of Rongjiu after being reborn, his secret will be out. And judging by the situation right now, he must have had a really good time with Rongjiu last night. So if he happens to beat up Rongjiu right now, after the night that they have spent, it might be a really awkward situation for him and people might think he is crazy. So Moran adjusted his facial expressions and pretended to be confused and forgetful. He asked Rongjiu about the date. Rongjiu replied, "It's May 4th. Moran asked, "Here?" Rongjiu replied, 34. After answering Moran's questions, Rongjiu smiled and made a joke about how great men are often forgetful about trivial things. After gathering all the information Moran needed, he began to analyze the situation. In this particular year, he was 16 and something really big happened, which changed his life forever. He was identified as the long-lost nephew of the leader of the Shizun Peak. Moran still could not believe what he was hearing. Was he really reborn? Or is he dreaming? Right when he was lost in his thoughts, Rongjiu got up and brought some food for Moran. Moran was not sure how to act to this yet, but he figured that he should just follow along and everything will be okay. So he turned his charm on and began to playfully pinch Rongchio and flirted back. They flirted for a while. All of a sudden, Moran remembered all the good things Rongchio did to him in his previous life. He smiled and he stared at Rongchio and recalled all the treacherous things Rongchio had done and wanted to teach him a lesson. Moran pulled him to the bed and did the deed. Even if the 15-year-old Moran was known for his tenderness and loving attitude in bed, he was not his 15-year-old self right now, and this 32-year-old Moran knew only violence. When Moran was done, he looked at Rongchio, totally passed out. But his face still had a faint grin. Moran was pissed. He thought, "Still smiling, aren't you?" He dragged Rongchio by his hair and picked up a shard of the pot which was left broken when they were having fun. Moran wanted to carve Rongchio's face with it. As he held Rongchio by his hair, he was thinking of his past. How well he used to treat Rongchio, how he used to pour out his heart to him, how he even thought of buying Rongchio's freedom once. But this ungrateful being backstabbed Moran and wanted to harm him. Moran wanted revenge. He wanted to punish him. He thought all Rongchio has is his body. If he destroys his face, he will be left with nothing to feed off of. As Moran was deep in thought and about to cut Rongchio's face, he was caught off guard. He realized what he was going to do and stopped himself. He was so used to being violent and evil, he completely forgot about his rebirth. At this very moment, nothing had really happened yet. Rongchio did not betray him yet. All the awful things that made him evil and violent have not happened yet. He realized he was still the 16-year-old kid who was unaware of the cruelties of the world. And the person who was dear to him, he still lived. He is still alive and well. On realizing this fact, Moran held back and sat down on a chair. He picked up a Yoshuan pancake from the plate placed on the table. These cakes were kind of a specialty of this brothel, although they were nothing special in taste, but still he was happy that he got to savor that familiar flavor once again. After finishing eating the cake, his head cleared up and he was able to completely grasp the fact that he was indeed reborn. It was real. He was back. That too, back to the past. He is still the 16-year-old Moran. He still has time. Everything he wished he could take back has not happened yet. He has still not committed any heinous acts yet. He has not killed anyone yet. He had still not killed his uncle and aunt yet. No one has died yet. Moran's chest filled with joy and his mood was uplifted in a moment. Though he had mastered and experimented with different techniques and successfully performed the 2 of the 3 forbidden techniques of the mortal realm, the only technique left unmastered by him actually did bring him back again. Rebirth. What a surprise, he thought. He locked every bit of rivalry, all the hate and complicated feelings of his previous life in a little corner of his chest. At that very moment, before he dived into the coffin. He really didn't want to live anymore. Yet, destiny had other plans. And he was still here, back in the past, alive and well. It's a second chance for him. He looked over towards Rongjiu again and thought, why ruin his faith? When all Rongjiu loved the most in this world is wealth and money. He'll just not pay this time. As a means of teaching him a lesson, he would just take some of Rongjiu's silver and leave. So, Moran did the same. With a smile on his face, he left with some of Rongjiu's valuables, thinking, just for this time, he's going to let Rongjiu off easily. With this thought, he tucked all of them in his Qiankun pouch, got dressed, and leisurely walked out of the brothel. I'm coming, Moran thought. We will meet again. Uncle, aunt, Shuemeng, Shizun, and his eyes softened when he thought of this very last person. I'm back to see you again. Shiga, I'm here. Well, that was the second chapter. We have ended the second chapter here. This venerable one lives. Well, this was a good read too. I like the story because we get to see a different side of Moran, and we also got to know that he always had homosexual feelings in his other life too, but maybe he didn't act on it. I don't know, that was not clear, because when he found out that he was sharing the same bed with a naked Rongjiu, he was shocked and disgusted at first, and yeah, that was a bit unclear information. I think he had homosexual feelings, but maybe he was hiding it at that point of time. We also got to know that Moran was not always an evil person. Something really terrible happened with him, so that's why in the future he became this unbearable tyrant of an emperor. So yeah, we kind of have a little background information about his youth here, and it was also revealed that he did actually kill his uncle and aunt. So yeah, too many reveals for this chapter to go through, and we got to know Moran and had someone special in his life that he loved the most, and that special person actually did die in the future. So yeah, that's chapter number 2 for you, and the very end of our episode. I'll be back with another episode next week, Wednesday again. So don't forget to tune in to Let's Talk Danmei to continue with the story. Lastly, if you have made this far into the video, I would really appreciate it if you smash that like button. If you enjoyed my video, share it with your friends and family who enjoy Danmei stories, and subscribe to my channel, The Danmei Central. With this, I'm signing off. See you in my next video. Bye bye.